Hello, friends. Good evening, good morning, wherever you are. It's such a pleasure to be here today back with BSB Live. And today I have a very, very good friend and a guest, Andrew Bryant. Andrew Bryant is a very known and a close friend of mine. Uh, Let me introduce you to him. For nearly 25 years, Andrew has been crafting and delivering valuable and memorable experiences for diverse audiences. From Singapore to Silicon Valley, he has inspired, informed, and ignited audiences to take ownership and responsibility, to be more creative and collaborative, to be more human in a digitally disrupted world. Now, who is Andrew Bryant? He's a global expert and author on self leadership. He has published his fourth book now called The New Leadership Playbook, Being Human While Successfully Delivering Accelerated Results. This is a book for managers and leaders in the times we now live in. Andrew is the founder of Self Leadership International, a C suite advisor and coach to executive leadership teams. He is certified speaking professional, that is CSP, TEDx speaker, former president of Asia Professional Speakers Singapore. For all this, Andrew is most proud of the work he has done building self esteem and confidence for disadvantaged teenagers. Andrew now lives in Portugal, but he's British by birth, Australian by passport, and Brazilian by wife. That's very interesting. So, welcome, Andrew. Welcome to this show. And I'm so happy to welcome you and thank you for accepting my invitation. I also want to tell my viewers before I go further that it was in May 2019 that I went to Singapore to attend the Asian Professional Speakers Convention. And that's where there were more than 30 speakers. But the one I really hooked on to, followed, and met him in India again, and we've been connected through and through, is Andrew Bryant. He stood out in those 30 speakers because of various things. I have followed him through and through. I follow his self leadership principles, and I am a great fan of his leadership ideas, which I use in my leadership coaching. And I've learned a lot in my own personal leadership from him. So thank you, Andrew, and over to you for your little journey of how did you reach here. Tell us something about your life, how you came to this leadership field.
Wow, thank you, Sushal. It's nice to connect and to speak to my friends in India. It's a continent that I've been visiting for 20 years. I love the people, love the food, love the energy. So happy to beam into you from sunny Portugal today. So you've given a long introduction. How to add to that? Well, I was born at a very early age and went to school in England. I went to an English grammar school, which gave me a good, thorough education. I was a great student. It was an all-boys school until they merged my boys' grammar school with the girls' high school just before my A-levels. So I had originally planned to do medicine, but with that distraction, there was a disruption to my grades. I'll leave it to your audience to wonder what happened there. And I got in to do physiotherapy. So in 1979, I engaged in studying physiotherapy. And I enjoyed it. It's a very pragmatic science. It helps people. It has its origins in rehabilitation post the wars, plus electrotherapy. So there's a lot of physics and mechanics. And one of the things that has stayed with me from my time as a physiotherapist. I don't do that anymore. I haven't done it for decades now. But one of the things that it gave me was the ability to observe, the ability to watch somebody walk or run or jump or throw and diagnose the issue. And it also gave me a principle, which is prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. And my work today, working with senior leaders, senior leadership teams, developing self-led cultures, very often people say, well, what are you going to do? And I will say, I don't know yet. I need to go and meet the people. I need to go and see what's happening. I need to observe the behavior and understand what's driving that, because prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. And so that very much tells you a lot about how my brain works. I'm a great people watcher. I love to sit in cafes and watch people. I love to sit in the lobby of an organization and watch people come and go. It's quite funny when I'm waiting to meet the CEO and I'm sitting in the lobby watching things happening, and it tells me a lot. Actually, I've got a fun example about that. One tech company that I used to work with a managing director for Asia with, used to have to go and sign in at the desk with a Kalamazoo triplicate paper to create your ID badge. And one day I'm chatting to the managing director and I said, you realize you're a tech company, right? He goes, yeah, of course we are. I said, well, why is it I sign in with a piece of paper, right? Surely you guys could automate that. And the next time I visited, it surely had been automated. Anyway, a little bit about me, how I think. Over to you. What are your questions?
Okay, yes. So that was very nice. I really wanted to know a little bit more about your self leadership. See, that is where you started, and that was, and you're still, I think, even in your latest book, in the part 4, you start by saying leadership, self leadership is the first step. And I have studied your book. I have read, I mean, I've known about it. And I always feel that if you can't be a self leader, you can't really be an effective leader. If you can't manage yourself, you can't lead yourself, how would you lead others? So, can you just expand a little more on that before you come to the new leadership playbook?
Yes, I was just teasing you, but there was a story in there, because self-leadership starts with self-awareness, does it not?
Yeah.
And you can't lead others unless you first lead yourself. And so the observation of others and the observation of ourselves are correlated. It's very difficult to observe other people if you don't know yourself, because you don't know the lens through which you are looking at other people. So when did I have that epiphany? Well, firstly, at school, you got feedback. You said the wrong thing to the wrong person, and they took you out the back and swung a few punches at you. When I went to university, if you weren't leading yourself, you got immediate feedback. Then I graduated as a physiotherapist, and I worked firstly in hospitals for a couple of years. And the doctors would say to the physiotherapists, motivate the patient, right? Now, the patient had just had double hip replacements. They were not motivated to get out of bed. They were in pain. And so I observed around how do you get people to do things? After a couple of years working in hospitals, I worked with sports teams. And I began to observe what was the difference that made the difference in those athletes that performed, those teams that performed, and what was it? And a lot of it is around the ability to take the feedback. This doesn't work. I need to adjust it. And the self-awareness, what am I thinking? What is the narrative? Simple example is golf. If anybody's ever played golf and they've looked at the hole or the green and they see the bunker and they're swinging the club, the narrative is, must not put it in the bunker, must not put it in the bunker. Well, sure enough, that ball's going in the bunker. We get what we focus on. So I had this epiphany through my early work as a physiotherapist, and then moving into sports and sports psychology, performance, and then pivoting into helping organizations. And I mean, one day I got a call from a CEO, and he said, look, Andrew, you've helped my sports team improve, the team that we sponsor, and I know that you've had some impact in helping them win. I now want you to come and look at my management team, because they're not operating like a team. And I said, okay, I'm up for the challenge. And I turned up with a blank sheet of paper and a pen, and I watched them. And again, prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. What were they doing that works? The first thing is, and this does reference to the new leadership playbook, is that management teams are often the worst performing team in the whole organization because they're not a team at all. They're a group of functions that report into the CEO or the managing director. And that was the first thing that I noticed. This is not a team. And so self-awareness, step one. Then you have to have self-learning. You have to be able to take the feedback, make the adjustments. And then you have self-regulation, which, or some people call self-management or emotional intelligence. It's a little more than emotional intelligence. It is the regulation of taking ownership of your thoughts, feelings, words, and actions towards your objectives. In fact, that's the definition of self-leadership. I think, let me see what I can do here. Look, there you go. Self-leadership is, according to my 2012 book with Dr. Anna Kazan, the practice of intentionally influencing your thinking, feeling, and actions towards your objectives. So it's about being the driver of your own life. It is about being self-aware, learning from your past behaviors and the environment, and regulating yourself towards the achievement of your objectives.
Absolutely powerful and profound. So, this is what I have really been following after having been into the military and experienced military leadership for 34 years. It was many years later that I uh, came to know you and your book. And then when I read all that, I really found a lot of sense in that, and I have been using it very much, not only uh, in my classes or with my students, but also in my own life. So thank you for enlightening us on that. Now I would like you to tell us, how did you then think of leadership for the present environment? We are living in the VUCA world, and I've added three D's to it because VUCA is an old term by now. So the three D's that I say are the digital, disruptive, and diverse. So diverse, digital, and disruptive. In this world, how do you think your new leadership playbook or your new principles would be applied? And how did this book come into your mind?
Happy to share. But firstly, the tagline from your team is,
Oh yeah,
if
sorry,
I can,
sorry.
yeah, that's okay. It's prescription without diagnosis is
Oh,
malpractice. So telling people what to do, and
sorry.
it's funny that you it's okay if it's funny that you that you reference your military experience because the military is about prescription, isn't it? Do this, take that hill, march up this road, load your rifle. It's very much prescription. There's no to and fro. Now, the world changed in 2020. I mean, the end of 2019 when things started, but it wasn't until 2020 that we noticed that the world had changed dramatically. We experienced a pandemic. Now, the forces that created that pandemic had been around for a while. We had known, anybody who had studied any biology knew that a pandemic was a certainty. It was going to happen at some point. In fact, the US government did actually have a playbook on how to cope with it. We saw the pandemics, the outbreaks of Ebola. So we knew that was going to happen. We also had the advancement of digitization, but people were still doing business as usual. They were saying you need to come into the office and we need to be able to lean over your shoulder and prescribe what you need to do. We need to see you so that we know that you're working, and we need to see you between these hours and these hours. We need basically synchronous working. And forget work from home, forget asynchronous working. It won't work. Then the pandemic came along and organizations had to say, well, actually, you need to go home and you need to operate digitally, and you need to be able to operate asynchronously. You need to be able to pass your work on to somebody else. So there was a massive reframe. Suddenly, things that were not possible now were immediately required. And this caused a massive disruption. Now, I'm working with leaders, leadership teams at the beginning of this. And just at the end of 2019, one of my clients, whom I was coaching the entire executive leadership team, including the CEO, the chief people officer said, look, I want a management playbook. You've worked with our senior leaders. I want something to codify, to embed in our culture in terms of how managers should manage and lead. Would you write us a book? And we to and froed a bit about the investment in that. And I said, well, okay, I will create the training program for you that you can have as a book, but I'll keep the IP. Then the pandemic hit. And so it was fortuitous from some sense that as I wrote the book, I wrote it for the new normal. I wrote, how are you going to have a feedback conversation if you're not face to face? How do you engage and motivate people if you're not micromanaging them, you're not leaning over their shoulders? And very much what leadership styles are important. And I understood the concepts of leadership styles. I understood the theory. I'd gone off and done my MBA. I'm an external lecturer on a couple of MBA programs. And I had leaders who were struggling with their leadership style. I had one leader who was figuratively in the fetal position going, my runway has disappeared. I just rebranded the company. We were ready to take off. And now the pandemic has happened and I don't know what to do. And I said, well, you need to lead. You have all these people. You're sitting, or you're curled up or sitting. I'm using the analogy of figuratively in the fetal position. You're curled up in a nice house in Napa Valley, but what about your people? How are they doing? Have you connected with them? And I was able to support him to be the leader that he needed to be. Now, I just spoke to that leader very recently that they're just about to finish the third record quarter because they focused on the people. And I think the thing that I would love to really emphasize is that even with the acceleration of digitization, it is the humanity that leverages performance. It is understanding that leadership is we're always leading people. We can manage systems, but we have to lead people. And human beings are soft and squidgy, but they have incredible fortitude. They will do anything for you if they understand why it needs to be done, that they have buy-in to the process. So leadership for the new workplace is very much about being human and delivering accelerated results. So another couple of stories that are in the book is inappropriate leadership style for context. There was one female leader who, women tend to be much better at empathy and understanding than men do. It's a generalization, but let's go with that. And she was a great leader before the pandemic, but at the pandemic point, she needed to be much more directive, and that wasn't in her repertoire. Think about it. If we're sitting on the aeroplane and the oxygen masks do fall from the ceiling, if the captain came out of the cockpit and said, ladies and gentlemen, we've got a bit of a problem. I'd like you to create some focus groups. I'd like your input and buy-in in terms of what I should do about it. Then we'd all be, I joke that even the atheists would get religion at this point. So she didn't have the ability to be a directive leader in this circumstance. Typically, I'm coaching people who got to the top of organizations by being very prescriptive and directive, and then they hit a glass ceiling because to get any further, as our friend Dr. Marshall Goldsmith says, what got you here won't get you there, is that they need to learn that it's all about the people. So the pandemic was a catalyst for me articulating many of the lessons that I had shared with, coached, and learned from the leaders I'd worked with over the last 20 plus years.
Absolutely good. So I understand this, and I also feel, like Marshall Goldsmith also said that leadership is a contact sport, and then came pandemic, and we used to say that yes, even in the army, fighting a battle is a contact sport, and yet we know how we do it when we are not in constant contact with people. We are generally, and they were not the days of internet. We have been communicating with people through SOPs, through line communication, through signals communication, and yet carrying on with our operations. So I also used some of those principles that we used in the army during COVID, because it was quite similar, that you were to lead people without being in close contact with them. And this, I think, is something which needs so much of attention, that being human. I remember I wrote an article once saying, how human is your resource, for a HR magazine. How human is the resource? Because there was a culture coming up which I noticed was, when you are being more result oriented, you're interested in the targets, you're interested in numbers, but you're forgetting the people. And it is the people who are going to give you the results. So I'm so much in um, connect with that, and I'm so much in agreement with what you're saying. One has to be totally human focused, and when we talk about being human, and yet delivering accelerated results, are the two things I think a leader needs to balance. You have to have empathy, but you also have to have firmness. Like one of our commandants in staff college used to say, you have to have a streak of ruthlessness also. As a leader, you need that whip also at times. So you need to have that fine balance between the two.
So absolutely agree. And this is why, when you said, tell me about yourself, and I'm telling you the formative experience of observation, right? That my training in being a physiotherapist, in observing things. And so when I'm supporting leaders, very often they're not reading the room. And as you say, you're somebody's boss, you're not their friend. Right. And I've had this conversation with leaders before when they've hired a friend and said, by all means hire a friend, but you've got to be prepared to fire the friend too. Right. Jim Collins said, get the right people on the bus, get the wrong people off the bus. So one of the things, and there's a strategy in the book that I will share with your audience today, and that is office and officer. And you might like this with a military background. When we see the president of the United States, whoever that is, walk across the lawn, the south lawn of the White House, and get into Marine One, the green helicopter, the Marine salutes the president of the United States. They are saluting the office, not the officer, i.e. the incumbent. If a doctor has to give you bad news, they, touch wood, this never happens. They say, oh, we need to do some surgery and, remove your foot, right? That would be an awful piece of news. Now, I could be somebody's friend and their doctor say, oh, I should remove your foot, but you're my friend, so I'm not going to remove your foot. Well, not removing the person's foot might mean their ultimate demise. So there is the human being, and then there is the office of the doctor. And the same goes for all of the professions, a doctor, a lawyer, whatever. So as a leader, we have to understand that we are an officer. We're a human being. We bring our humanity to the day. But periodically, we are accountable to the office that we hold, and that we are responsible for ourselves, but accountable to that frame. So if I'm operating as a manager, I will, empathize and understand. If somebody's not performing, I can lead the performance conversation with, look, we're having a performance conversation because you haven't met your targets. Can I just inquire, is there something going on with you that I need to know about before I give you feedback about your performance? And they might say, well, yeah, look, I'm caring for my sick mother, blah, blah, blah. I'm sorry I haven't been focused. And we might be able to say, okay, great. Look, what resources do you need to look after your mother? Can we send her a ventilator, whatever? Let me get somebody to cover your work for 2 weeks, but then I'll need you back, and I'll need you back at 100%. So that shows empathy. It shows, this person, if they were supported through that period, would be incredibly loyal to that company, right? But it can't go on forever, because you can't carry people forever. You might say 2 weeks, a month, whatever there is. Then when that person comes back and you say, great, how's your mum? Fantastic. Awesome. Now we need to play catch up. Here's some targets. Let's make sure we do those. So if we just go, you haven't met your target, now I'm going to pile onto you, and this person has some other area of their life that's not working, it's not going to work. This person's just going to leave, and you have to fill the position. So starting with, where is this person coming from? Every meeting, everybody that's joined the Zoom call, everybody that's joined this Zoom call today has a life before, well, I think we're on StreamYard or LinkedIn, whatever we're streaming today. Everybody that's come on this virtual call has brought their humanity to the call, right? Are you having a good day? You're having a terrible day. I love my American colleagues who constantly say, are you having a good day? Well, sometimes life has other plans, right? And so we need to say, instead of have a good day, take care. So, because we don't know what's going on in somebody else's life unless we inquire. Anyway, I feel like I'm rambling here. Feel free to ask me another question.
No, 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 no. That was perfect. It was going very well in the flow. And I like this. What you've said about office and officer was something we were taught in the army right from our day one, that you had to understand. And we also used another term there, which was called on parade and off parade, which means that I am absolutely in my office, my behavior with you would be absolutely official. And there is no time for casual, conversations and all. But when I meet you in the evening over a drink, then I'm totally your friend, then I'm not an officer. So that, switching on and off from your officer to your on parade to your off parade, or being an officer and a friend, was very distinctly taught to us. And I feel that in the corporate world, there is generally a mix up of this, and this needs to be handled well if you want good results.
It is, and sometimes I've talked to my coachees and said, you wear a number of hats, borrowing from Edward de Bono's metaphor for thinking hats of different colors, and I will often say, look, just do one conversation per meeting, right? So when I was a kid, and probably many people watching this had the same experience, we got a watercolor set in a tin. There was red and blue and green, and you had a paintbrush, and you got a jam jar, you filled it with water, and you dipped your brush in, and you got the green for the grass, and then you should clean your brush before you painted the sky blue. If you didn't, and you mixed the colors, you just got this strange brown color across everything. So it's very important to frame the conversation. In the New Leadership Playbook, there are 12 practical plays. And each of those plays is fundamentally a conversation, the feedback conversation, the crucial conversation, which is, I like to call the fish on the table conversation. There's the career development conversation. And in each of these conversations, are we using the blue? Are we using the green? Are we using the yellow? So we are being very clear in our communication in terms of, and this is something that I have taken from my self-leadership work and brought here, is the ability to frame a thing, is to say, I'm speaking to you as your manager, or I'm speaking to you as your friend, right? So you mentioned going and having a drink afterwards in the bar. That's a friendship. Now, if that person every time they goes to the bar, drinks too much and it has to be put to bed, we might say, hey, speaking to you as your friend, is this working out for you that, we need to put you into bed every time? What's that doing to your personal brand? But if we are in the work position, we may or may not be able to bring that situation up. And we would say, hey, speaking to you as your manager, you are not turning up in a fit state to execute your duties, and I need to put you in a performance improvement plan to address that. So this is where the barriers, the understanding of the self-leadership of me, I'm responsible for my thoughts, my feelings, my words, my actions. You are responsible for your thoughts, feelings, words, and actions, but we are accountable to, we're in a frame of the relationship.
So, beautiful. Yeah, that's wonderful. And I think you've simplified it a lot by giving the example of that color box that we used to have, 12 colors. I still remember, as you said, I could visualize that. And it's something about switching on and switching off, like you clean the brush before you use the other color. So I think that's a very, very good way of understanding that in leadership, when you have different roles, you need to switch from one role to the other and don't mix them up. And particularly, I think make the people understand which role are you mentioning. And like you said, it makes a lot of sense if you say, as a manager, I'm telling you, or as a friend, I'm telling you. I think it makes a lot of difference, because then the recipient is clear that which role or which angle are you uh, talking from.
Yeah.
So that
So
is great.
this speaks to intentionality, right? So the definition of self leadership again is the practice of intentionally influencing your thinking, feeling, and actions towards your objectives. So most people are not very intentional. Because we're an accident of birth, right? We don't choose the time, place of our birth. We don't choose our parents. Well, I mean, I know there are some people that believe that we do, but I'm certainly not aware of floating around in the ether and choosing my parents. The fact that I was born in England and you were born in India is an accident at birth. If I'd say to you, "Are you proud to be Indian?" I'm sure you would say yes. If you say, "Am I proud to be English?" I might say, "Well, not since Brexit." But the the point being is that at some well, the point is, and I'm using 2 points in the one conversation, which is bad English, but anyway, at some time we come to a realization that everything we've done is pretty much programmed by our parents, by our teachers, by the place and time of our birth. At some point, we have to choose to be the driver of our own life. We have to get intentional, right? This is my life. This is my career. I need to move. So we have to lead ourselves before we lead others. We have to ask ourselves the question, where am I going? How am I going to get there? How fast do I want to go? And who do I want with me on the journey? When we start taking ownership of answering those questions, we step up as a self-leader. And as we step up as a self-leader, other people become attracted to us. I mean, a lot of people talk about charismatic leadership. Well, for me, charismatic leadership is just somebody who knows where they're going. Right? And we want to follow somebody who has a vision, who has a direction, who is taking responsibility for themselves, making adjustments, using the driving analogy. If it's rough roads, they adjust their driving. If it's raining, they adjust their driving. If there's a detour, they go around the detour. So we look to our leaders, and we know there's lots of research around, leaders who have some level of authenticity and say, hey, I'm taking responsibility for myself. I'm not just using the office. I'm taking some ownership. I'm constantly learning. I'm growing. And that's why self-learning is so much a part of self-leadership.
Very good. I'm really uh, absolutely impressed by what you're saying. And I can see that, and I can feel that when you have a leader who shows you the way, and you know that you have that confidence that he'll lead me through, that he knows where the detours are, he knows where the speed breakers are, and uh, he will help me and the organization move in the right direction. I think that really makes a lot of difference.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, and with the utmost respect, we should say he and or she,
Yeah.
because leadership is not. Yeah. Remember your third D of diversity, right?
Yeah.
Nobody has a monopoly on a good idea, and a lot of because of the military and because of hierarchies, we tend to default to leadership being very much a male attribute, but it is certainly not.
Because I'm actually
We're
getting
talking about.
used to, I'm getting used
I
to
know.
this idea of saying they. And uh, I recently remember doing a speaker training course where they were talking about, don't say ladies and gentlemen. Now you can say hello everyone, because you don't know, there could be different people there. Yeah. Okay. So now I saw in your book a very interesting formula, which I really liked, and that is clear expectations into mindset and motivation into right behaviors is accelerated result. And I'd certainly like you to tell us a little more about that, and also a few more of those very impactful formula. And also, I've seen that your diagrams in this book are so impactful. which I think this makes that playbook a very effective leadership playbook.
Well, thank you for noticing and for referencing that. Actually, let me. I think I have that. I think I have that slide for you. Let me see if I can. There it is. There it is. There's the formula. Oh, one too many. So, yes, this the way I carved up the book. Look, a lot of leadership books that you and I have read approach leadership from 30,000 feet looking down. And there are thousands of leadership books written and published each year. So my intention in writing this specifically for one client, they wanted something that was very practical and duplicatable. So I went, well, how do I approach it? What's the definition of leadership? Well, there are as many definitions of leadership as authors who've tried to write about the topic. What is it? What is leadership traits or leadership values? All of this is very complicated. So I thought, well, how do I keep it simple? Well, the intentionality comes from leadership principles, and I gave 7 leadership principles. The leadership principles influence a leadership framework. And the framework that I've been using for 20 plus years is this: clear expectations times mindset and motivation equals right behaviors. So when I've ever stood in front of an MBA class or a group of leaders for a company that's brought me in to help them, I've said, you all need to buy a piece of equipment to enhance your leadership. And they all get their pens and paper ready to see where they need to buy this. And I say, it's very simple. You can get it at most hardware stores. You could get it at IKEA. It's called a mirror. Because if you're not getting results from your people, you go look in the mirror and see whether you set clear expectations for them. And thankfully, I say it with a big smile and nobody gets too offended. But the reality is, so often we don't get the results we're looking for because we hadn't set the clear expectations. We hadn't said, here's why this is important. This is what success looks like. Here's an example of success. All the various things that we can do around setting clear expectations. We send people off and we have a mental map around what success looks like, but we fail to communicate that. And so the first place is to look at how you do it. So many managers, so many leaders are terrible at articulating things in behavioral-based terms. What is it that you are going to see in terms of a behavior? So instead of KPIs, key performance indicators, we need KBIs, key behavioral indicators. What are the behaviors that we're going to see? And you could dial it down. You've been to Sentosa, so you've been to Singapore, so you know about Sentosa, the little holiday island that is connected to Singapore. It used to have a gateway where you had to pay some money to go on the island, and they used to have these young volunteers, not volunteers, young interns, or working in university, and they were supposed to take the money and say, have a great stay, and wave, and they did a really good job. And yet, I've had the experience of going to Starbucks. And they're supposed to say, have a great day. And I've ordered my tall non-fat latte and they've said, have a great day. So now we have a contrast of behavior. We have, hey, and if you've been to Disney, you've had the same experience of the Disney people as if it really mattered to them that you have a great day. And then you had the experience I had at one Starbucks only, have a great day. And so the behavior in terms of tonality versus the wave and the genuineness, the authenticity of it. You can say, look, success in this particular case is an enthusiastic full buy-in in terms of welcoming our visitors. And if you can't do that, then maybe this isn't the job for you.
Yeah, it is something like when your son comes back home having hit, let's say, 6 sixers, and he's come very proudly to tell you, and you say, oh, that's well done. Instead of saying, oh, that is wonderful. That is, So I get what you're saying, that your behavior has to match the context in which you're talking. And,
Sure.
here I'm reminded of my commandant in staff colleges way back in 83, taking a leadership class, he talked of exactly what you're saying, clear expectations. And he spent quite some time on saying that next time when you find that your orders have not been implemented the way you wanted them, go back and re-examine the instruction that you had given, whether it was a written instruction or a verbal instruction. Where did you specify what you wanted? And he says 99% you will find that the results were not achieved because your instructions were not clear. You didn't spell out your expectations the way you should have. So you are
Yep.
reiterating that same thing, and I think it's a very vital point. It's a very, very vital point.
Yes. And this speaks to the fact that a lot of leadership is almost timeless, right? And so this is the new leadership playbook. The distinction is that I've taken this framework and applied it to current situations. Okay. So the next part, of course, is mindset and motivation. And since we're dealing with humans, the mindset and the motivation piece is well studied. That's not new either. People are motivated when they have ownership of the process, that they expect that they can improve, that they have a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset that says, if I don't get it right the first time, then I'm a failure. So we've studied the psychology of mindset. There's the great book Mindset by Professor Carol Dweck. Motivation, I look at my favorite writer on motivation is a Dr. Victor Froome, who back in, I think it was around about in the 1960s, talked about expectation theory, that we are motivated when we expect that our effort will gain us a reward that is valuable to us. If I'm going to do this job, am I going to learn? Am I going to grow? Am I going to get a promotion? Am I going to get visibility? And often these motivations are very intrinsic and not necessarily related to money. So just paying people more doesn't motivate them. And managers and leaders need to understand that psychology.
Absolutely.
So, and then the last bit is the right behaviors. And I've already articulated that people struggle to express what behaviors are, and they struggle to role model those behaviors. And so then in the book, there are 12 plays, which are the behaviors which have been evidenced in very practically to deliver both financial results while at the same time being human, because we're humans working with humans. And even in the presence of AI, digital, machine learning, when we do this right, technology becomes our partner, our assistant, and not our replacement. And I think it's very important that we have that mindset, that motivation, that I look to technology to enhance my humanity, not to replace it.
Very important. Yeah, very pertinent. And yes, I also find that these three very, very clear uh, elements really multiply into accelerated results. And it looks so, you've simplified it so beautifully. It's easy to understand. And I really like that. Was a good takeaway for me. The KBI instead of KPI, the KBI.
Mm.
And that's going to be something which I am going to be, yes, learning and using that now very well.
Well, if
And
you do the KBIs, you will get the KPI eventually, right?
yeah, yeah, obviously, yes, because you have identified that the root is KBI, and
Yeah,
if KBI is right, the results will automatically be in KPI.
very
Okay.
good.
Now the next thing I would like to ask you is there are more examples in your book, and some of them really fascinated me. And one was this path goal theory. Now that sounds very fascinating, and I'll certainly like you to give us a little idea of that as to how this theory really works.
Yes. So as I said, I am. My job is to be a practitioner, not to be a theorist. But I think it's important that in this book that people know that it is based in evidence. Now, the way path goal theory looked at the relationship between leadership style and followers and context. And so I like to just say this, that leadership is a three-legged stool. That effective leadership is the leader's style depending on the motivation and the skill level of the followers, depending on the context. Now, I gave one example of that earlier in our conversation. The aeroplane in crisis, the people skill is low. I mean, most people don't know how to fly a plane that are traveling on a plane. And therefore, the only leadership style in that scenario is directive. The captain needs to say, fasten your seatbelts, I'm going to land the plane. There is no room for discussion in that scenario. But let's say you're a PhD and you're leading a team of other PhDs and you're doing some research. There's no urgency. You're looking for the cure for cancer. Well, you've got highly motivated, highly skilled individuals in a very stable environment. If you start throwing your weight around and being directive, those people will get demotivated very quickly and leave. So you need to, in this case, be very much more participative, much more consultative in your leadership style, because you're reading the room. And that's something, again, I said earlier in this conversation, leaders need to learn to read the room. Who am I leading? What's going on for them? What's happening? And making sure that they understand that before they go into the leadership style. So path goal theory, I would just say to think about leadership as three things. What's the situation? Who am I trying to influence? And I'm switching the word leadership for influence here. And therefore, what is my best style to use, right? So, I mean, you asked me to be on your show. You didn't tell me to be on your show. You didn't try to bribe me to be on your show. You could have tried that, actually. I'm open to bribes, but I'm joking. You asked based on friendship, right? So you read the room. You know that I'm happy to talk about something that's near and dear to me, which is leadership and self-leadership. So it was very easy to influence me to say yes. Right? But if I was reticent and I was busy, and then you would have had to change your influence style to engage me more, to get me to do something. So I mean, I find this very interesting that people will expect me to do something without establishing the relationship first. And I'm like, well, hey, I'm at a time in my life where I don't have to win a popularity contest. So, I'm quite happy to say no, thank you very much. So leadership is influence, and influence is the ability to get a willing yes, not an unwilling yes. Now, you can always get an unwilling yes. You can hold a gun to somebody's head. You can manipulate them. You can beg them, which I believe is persuasion. But when you're leading them, you're getting them to a willing yes. So you have tapped into their motivation, and you've chosen the right leadership style for that context. And that is my articulation of House and Mitchell's path goal theory, which is a 1970s piece of research.
Very good. Very good. Actually, it's quite close to this definition, which I find very useful, which says that leadership is an art of making people do what they intrinsically wouldn't have done, which they on their own wouldn't have done. So you said willingly accept your direction or your way of getting things done, that they do it willingly, they get a willing yes.
They are, because there's something in it for them, right? So, and understanding what drives people, what motivates people. And again, this comes back to the self-awareness. Do I know what drives me? Now, some years back, I did a marketing exercise where, with the help of somebody you and I both know, Dr. Jerome Joseph, who is the brand guy. And we went out to 500 of my clients with a survey around how they'd experienced what I did. And in Jerome's questionnaire, it asked them about what value they saw from me. Now, if you'd asked me my values, I'd probably have come up with a list. But what was interesting is that we got feedback from 500 people. They put that through a word cloud and came up with 3 values. And those values, for me personally, and I'm happy to share them with you and your audience, is transformation. I love creating change. Ownership. It's all about self-leadership. I want people to take responsibility for themselves. And impact. I've talked about impact results. So if there's change but no output, then what's the point? And so for me, that gives me an inner narrative for what drives me as a human being. I'm a catalyst for change. And I say to my clients, or with their before them, my clients, "Are you sure you want to hire me? Because if I turn up, there's going to be some change. You okay with that? I'm not just going to tick a box for a training and so everybody's happy. We got that off the calendar. No, if I turn up, I'm going to challenge people to take ownership and to create an impact. So if you want to influence me, talk to me about, hey, Andrew, here's an opportunity for you to create some transformation, help some people with ownership, and make an impact. And I'm there. I turn up with bells and whistles on, right? But if you prescribe to me, oh, Andrew, you should turn up because this is about stakeholder value and making more money for the stakeholders, I'm like, yeah, I'm not so interested, unless I'm one of the stakeholders.
Okay. So we've got some comments coming up now. So Dave Buck says, being the driver of my own life, a very important concept we all need to adopt and understand. Okay.
Yeah.
And here is somebody like me also very happy about KPIs to KBIs. That's nice. Okay. So, Andrew, I think we are coming to the close of the session. And before we close, can you please um, tell us something about this book which should make any other powerful point about this book which we have missed out so far? And I have already ordered this book. In fact, I wanted that book to be here in my hand today, but it couldn't reach me in time. So I am going to be certainly recommending this to all my friends because I have got an abridged copy of and a PDF from Andrew, which I've gone through word by word, and I've really loved it. I see the flow is so good, the diagrams are so good, and it's very simplified. It's easy to understand and easy to implement, and that is what makes it good. So let's have your last sort of power packed point that you want to deliver on this book, so that we understand the main concept behind it.
Well, I would say it this way. I mean, a lot of people I talk to about leadership think that they already are a good leader, and so they don't need anything, and or they've done an MBA and they've led an organization. So I would just ask, what if there's something in here that would just increase your leadership by 5%? Would it be worth reading it for that? Point one. Point two, maybe you do know about leadership, but you don't know how to necessarily cascade that down to your front line. A huge issue I see in organizations is that you do have some great leaders, but they don't build bench strength. They don't have a wide bench so that they can then scale the organization because the people that are working for them have been developed and then they have a framework. And the third point is that this then gives everybody within the organization that has the book the similar language. We use the word KBI, which you like that. Great. Well, see how powerful that is when we're both talking about the same thing. So, the last thing I would say is, yeah, sure, I wrote the book and I'd love to sell the book, but I don't make a lot of money from the book. What I'm really interested in is creating change. And what I would love to see is a whole bunch of people leading an organization, being agile, all talking the same language, and them coming back and saying, hey, we changed this behavior and that's why we got that impact. Thank you very much, Andrew. And then there is my legacy, which is the last piece of my own motivation. So don't miss out. There might be something in here that you don't know. Make sure that your people have the right tools in their hands and build a culture that you are going to be proud of. And if this book helps you along the way, then certainly I have fulfilled my legacy.
So let me share this thing that I think I similarly, I mean, we really enjoy this common thing between you and me, that creating a change is something that excites me. It I always also look at how to, just one second, let me get this comment on. Yeah, yeah. So what I was saying is that it is what excites me in life, like what I can see you are talking about, is the change that you created, where a person says you impacted my life even by a wee bit more than what financially happens. Okay, it's okay that we charge for our trainings or we'll sell our books, but there is an element of money which is far lower than the change that you want to see, because your result is from how many people implemented it and found it impactful. So So nice to be in this conversation with you. Thank you very much, Andrew. And I'll really like to request all my friends who are here and who will watch the recording that you must look at this book as a very practical book. I can assure you, it is a doable thing. It is a practical thing. It will take you, and it has got principles which are universal. They have nothing to do with the times. They have nothing to do with the region you are in. They have nothing to do with the language you speak. They are universal principles which will be useful anywhere and everywhere. So thank you, Andrew, for being with us, and really grateful to you for this time of yours, your time and your valuable advice. Really grateful to you.
Absolutely, my pleasure, Sushil, and to all those that are watching out on LinkedIn or the recording, be the best you can be.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Friends,
Thank you.
do write in your questions if you have. We got another 1 or 2 minutes. If you have any questions, you can write down in the comments. We can answer them. And also, if you, all those who are not able to attend, uh, do listen to this entire conversation in the recording. And I'm sure you will find value in what Andrew has just told us. So I don't see any questions coming up. So we'll end the conversation. Thank you very much to all of you who made it possible to attend it live. Shailesh, Akshata, Dave, Esther, Gio, and all those who were there. Thank you very much for being here, and uh, looking forward to seeing you again. Remember the new leadership playbook.com. I'm going to put this on the in the chat also so that you can visit this. Just a minute. Yeah, here it is. It is in the, yeah, now it is in the comments. Possibly it's only gone to the YouTube comments, but I'm going to put it here in the banner as well. Here it is. Please make a note of it. Go and visit this website and order your book. It'll be really, really handy if you really want to impact your own life and the impact the lives of people in your organization, in your family, in your surroundings. This is going to be a great tool for that. Thank you very much, and see you in the next session. 2 Wednesdays. I mean, I'm doing it alternate Wednesdays. So next to next Wednesday, see you again at 5 p.m. Thank you.